Hello and welcome, dear travellers, to Whispers from the Campfire, where the flames of our stories cast shadows on the unknown. I'm your guide through the eerie and the unexplained. So gather around as we delve into tales that chill the spine and stir the imagination. Tonight, I gather you here to tell tales of the weird and creepy things those little gremlins we call children come up with. So grab some marshmallows and gather close as we go through 10 Reddit stories to make you feel uneasy. I'm not 100% sure this fits because my mum confirmed it years ago, then denied it when I asked her a couple of months ago, but here it is. When I was little, my dresser, it was long but pretty short, sat against the wall with one of the ends pointed to my door. That dresser is heavy, an old wood one with all sorts of kid crap neatly arranged on top. Since it was in my bedroom, the floor was carpet. I always slept with the door closed. One night, with no explanation, the dresser tipped over, but instead of falling forward, it fell 180 degrees to the side, falling in front of my door. All the kid crap spilling to the side of it. My mum ran to get me, but couldn't open the door as it was being blocked by the dresser. Eventually, with her pushing and me pulling on the dresser, she was able to slip in and move the dresser out of the way. Nothing was damaged, not even the glass figurines I had. My dad helped, put it upright the next day, and we moved on. Years later, I remembered the incident and asked my mum about it, expecting to learn that I blew it out of proportion, and it only fell forward or something like that. Nope, she remembered that night as well. However, she added one detail that I could never figure out. She thought she heard me jumping on the bed that night, and that was why she thought the dresser tipped over. I had been asleep, and I have no idea where she heard that noise coming from. I'm a parent of toddlers and kids now, and I have a creepy story from last year. We were driving with my then 3-year-old son in the car and stopped at a red light next to a cemetery. Out of nowhere, my son looked over at the cemetery and said, "There are people laying down there and they can't get up." My wife asked my son what he was talking about, and he pointed to the cemetery and said, "All the people lying down in the park are stuck." My wife and I looked at each other in silence, completely freaked out. At this point in our son's life, there had been no deaths in the family, and we'd never discussed death with him. I'm still creeped out when I think about it. When I was a kid, my family lived in a blue house that was oddly shaped. One year, the house got completely gutted and nearly destroyed by a flood, and they had to knock down a wall between the living room and kitchen. So after the flood, you could see all the way down the hall to my parents' bedroom. This house was strange, for lack of a better term. I was a terrible sleeper as a kid, and would routinely wake up and just go into the living room and watch cartoons on low volume if I couldn't get back to sleep. One morning, I'm out in the living room, sitting across the chair with my feet up on a window. Don't ask me why, I was a stupid 8 or 9-year-old. From where the chair was, I could see just over the kitchen counter, down the hall to my parents' room. A movement caught my eye. I looked up and saw the shadowy outline of a man walking towards me, kind of near to my parents' door. Thinking it was my dad, I said something like, "Hey, Dad, sorry if the TV was too loud." My dad is a notoriously light sleeper and would wake up from anything, except there was no response. Within seconds, my foot ends up going through the window. Again, not sure if this is related or if I was a dumb kid, likely the latter, and I scream, and my parents actually wake up to figure out what's going on at 4:30 in the morning. At this point, I'm preoccupied, but realise much later that I definitely saw the outline of a man, but there was no way it was my dad because A, he came bounding out of the bedroom after my scream, and B, I realised the shoulders of that outline were much higher than what my dad's would have been. Fast forward to a few years ago, we've moved away from the blue house, and my mum and I are hanging out and catching up. For some reason the blue house comes up, and I tell my mum that the place still gives me the creeps, and weird stuff happened there when I was a kid. My mum's response? "Oh, you must have saw the shadow man too." When I was 3 years old, my grandma died. She lived in a house with us and we were very close. She had told my mum many times that she would do her best to make her passing easy on me since I was so young. The night that she died, my mum was laying in bed with her and heard her take her last breath. My mum laid there and cried for about 30 minutes before coming into my room to check on me. It was about 5 a.m. and there was no reason for me to be awake, but I was sitting up in my crib, playing, and when my mum asked me why I was awake, I said, "Grandma Flo just came in to give me a kiss goodbye." While changing my daughter in front of the open closet, she kept looking around me and laughing. I asked her what was so funny. She said, "The man," to which I replied, "What man?" She then pointed at the closet and said, "The man with the snake neck." I turned around and nothing was there. I'm afraid to look into the history of my house to see if anyone hung themselves in the closet, but at least she wasn't scared. My kid's Catholic school is over 100 years old. There is a basement under the gym that's used for storage. I was subbing once, and during recess, one of the kick balls goes down the stairs. A little girl was standing at the top of the stairs yelling, "Just throw it up to me." I went over and asked who she was talking to, and she replied, "That big man down the stairs." I went down there, and there was nobody down there, and it was the only way in. I asked some of the other kids if they had seen the man before, and they said yes, but Sister told us never to talk about him. I asked them to describe Sister, and they described a nun, and there haven't been nuns at the school in 40 years. Okay, backstory time. When I was a kid, Mr. Rand used to come into my room 4 or 5 times a week. He would talk to me and tell me about stuff, and how he was killed in World War II. See, old mate Rand was a figment of my 4-year-old imagination. Anyway, one day when I was 9 or so, Mr. Rand stopped showing up. Fast forward to about 3 years ago, and my son, who was about 5 at the time, walks out of his room one night at about 11:30 and says, "There's a man in his room." I flip out and run into his room to find nobody, to which he then says, "Mr. Rand said you can't see him anymore, but he's okay." The kid's got his own imaginary mate called Mr. Rand, but they only chat once or twice a year. Not my child, but my much younger brother. He came out into the living room and just sat one day. When I asked why he wasn't playing in his room, where he'd been before, he nonchalantly said, "Oh, I can't, the man's in there." Cue my dad running to the back of the house to see who the fuck was in my brother's room, but finding out no one was there. This happened multiple times until one day he walked into the closet in the kitchen, grabbed his T-ball bat, and started back to his room. When asked what he was doing, he said he was going to get the man out of his room. He never talked about the man again, so I guess he got him out. When my son was around 3 to 4, I had to drop him off at daycare before work around 5 to 6 in the morning. It's a very normal house on a suburban street. This particular morning, the sun is almost up. We were walking him toward the daycare house, maybe 30 feet from the door to the street. My son looked down the street. There is no one. No cars, no morning joggers, no animals, nothing. He stared for a couple of seconds and then asked me, "Daddy, who are those small people walking towards us?" Needless to say, I rushed him into the house and then got to work. Still gives me the shivers thinking about what he saw. When I was a kid, I remember having a night terror. I woke up in my bed, the top bunk, and saw a bunch of weird creatures in the hallway beckoning me to come into the hallway. When I did, there was this beautiful yet terrifying woman standing at the end of the hallway next to a big black sphere. She convinced me to enter the sphere. When I did, I woke up at the bottom of the stairs, shaking and crying, while my mum tried to calm me down. She told me I was running through the hallway back and forth between my sister's bed and my 2 brothers' beds, crying and saying, "I killed everyone, and it's all my fault." Everyone was and still is fine. However, since then, I felt like some part of myself was taken that night. Couldn't tell you what. Thank you for joining me by the campfire. If you like these stories, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, keep the fire burning and the stories alive.